Hi, I'm Andy Acton.
And I'm Chris Strevens.
This is Dentology, the Business of Dentistry podcast. That was a uplifting, exhausting, inspiring, enlightening episode.
Yeah, I think I would say that was a podcast of varying extreme emotions, wouldn't you? I mean, it was just like, and I think the other fascinating thing is, one, Sorab's so open, and two, he's, in comparison to us, but actually he's young. There's a lot going on in there, isn't there? I mean, flipping it.
Yeah.
I think it was a brilliant episode, a really good episode of just truth.
I think as well, somebody as honest and transparent and open about his broader life experiences, I think it will really help people, because I think a lot of people bottle things up or think it only affects them, whereas Sorab's a great example of somebody who's had his challenges, and when people listen to the episode, they'll see how hard some of those have been, yet he's still having great success. And quite often we associate, where people have personal challenges and life challenges, we assume they can't be successful, but you can actually be both. And there may be people out there that are having a difficult time, but on the surface it may appear that everything's in order and they're successful. So I think it will resonate. I think it's going to be a really important episode for people to listen to.
And talking about Jeremy Clarkson.
Exactly. Yeah, there's a cliffhanger, isn't it? No, great episode. So we're heading towards the end of 2024. Can you believe it?
Scary, isn't it? I think as you get older, being a man of old age, you realise that life is just whizzing by. When you were 4 and it took a year, so long, didn't it? And now I'm 60, there we go, 24, 25, Christmas soon. Oh, yeah. Unbelievable.
It is staggering. But we're here today recording because we've got a guest joining us.
Well, that's a bonus.
It is.
Otherwise, it would be just you and me.
We have done the occasional episode on our own.
We have occasional. It's much more fun with a guest.
Of course it is. Yeah. I'll sit next to you and talk to you all day long, so I don't need to do it again.
Yeah, do it again. But this has been recorded. So we have.
Today we have Dr. Sorabh Patel joining us, and Sorabh is a dentist and also a partner at Dental Beauty Partners. Welcome, Sorabh. How are you doing? You doing well?
Welcome.
Doing very well. Thank you, guys. Thank you for having me, Andy and Chris. And, how are you guys doing this morning?
We are good. We are appearing from our podcast room. You are appearing from your lounge or something.
I am. I'm sitting at our breakfast table, just enjoying the day while I can.
And I think pretending to have a day off, isn't that what you were saying? You're allegedly attempting a day off.
Yeah. Day offs don't exactly exist. But you got to grab a couple of minutes when you can.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, we will come on to that.
I was going to say, we were talking about that before we started recording, about how, as a business owner, what a day off actually looks like. But we'll come on to that as we have a conversation, because it's not as straightforward and as easy as people think it is. People say, you just switch off.
Oh, I thought it was easy.
Yeah, you just, perhaps it is for you. But I've been carrying him for the last 25 years.
That's back to the age thing. That's the fact of life.
That's why it's easy for us.
Yeah, dementia. That's what it is. I forget the short-term things, but a long time, 30 years ago, I can remember.
So just to kick off, they say that the biggest impact on our lives is kind of postcode, parents and education. Those are the things that kind of sort of set the early years in terms of our structure. So can we roll back to your childhood and give us a sense and a style of what that looked like for you when you were a kid?
How far back do we go?
Where were you born? How about that?
Well, look,
I'm trying to detect an accent of any description.
I can switch up the accent very well. You switch quite a lot when you get through the communication side of things. Look, it's your sort of standard sort of immigrant story, really. My parents came here sort of towards the end of the 80s. Both left India, came here, built a life for themselves. I was born in 92, stayed here for about a year or so. So once I was 2 years old, I think they couldn't afford the rent. So my granddad came to London, picked me up, took me to India. So I was in India from the age of 2 till about 5.
Wow!
It was my grandfather that raised me when I was in my early years.
Wow. Did you see your parents during that period or not?
No, because they were working. Parents working 2-3 jobs each. 16, 18-hour days to scratch together as much as they could to get a house. And when I was about 3 years old, I think my dad said they'd found a place and they were just looking to get a mortgage, and then they finally got it. By the time they'd completed on the house, we came back. My grandfather and I came back when I was about 4.5.
Wow.
And then we've been in that house ever since. Mum and Dad are still in that house, which is great.
Wow.
So
How
yeah,
remarkable.
that's where I think it was the hardest decision Mum had to make, but she knew that, you know, they just couldn't afford to keep me here because the rent they were paying, they were charging me more, and they technically counted me as a third person, even though I was like 6 months old.
Yeah,
so
you're not taking up much space. Yeah.
Yeah, so they were like, it was probably the hardest decision Mum and Dad had to make early on into their marriage, considering they'd been married a year. Back then, it was all arranged. So, you know, they didn't know each other for a long time, but they made the decision. I'm hoping it's paid off. I think it has.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that's how
But
I came to be.
I mean, for lots of people, I mean, we've heard similar stories before.
I love the fact that Sorabh started off with, well, it's just your normal sort of immigrant story that I came here and then I went back to India for 3 years.
But that's telling in itself, isn't it?
Yeah, it is amazing.
Like the way you describe it, it's like, yeah, there's lots of people that went through this. This is just kind of as it was.
I think it was like back in the 80s and, you know, the 70s and 80s when, you know, a huge amount of South Indian immigrants came to the country. That's all our parents did. You know, the first generation, they didn't know anything. All they had was the notion that they wanted a better life. And they had this, you know, incredible work ethic. And I've been around that all my younger life. You know, all my uncles, all my aunts, you know, friends and family, you know, the community that we were in, because we you know, I'm from South London, you know, from a place called Thornton Heath, kind of near Croydon. That's the easiest way to explain it to people. And, you know, it's a huge Indian population there. And that's what I grew up around. You know, everyone's parents were, you know, hard grafting, trying to provide what they could for their children, really. And I think seeing that work ethic in my younger years just reinforced that, you know, if you work hard, you can achieve the things you want to achieve.
But what a wrenching decision for your parents to decide as to whether they give up on their dream of staying in the UK and take their son back to India, or the terrible decision of saying, no, our son will go back to India and we will continue to build a life. And if it works, he'll come back. And if it doesn't work, we'll join at a later stage. That is a...
Do you remember the time when you were in India, Sorabh, or not really?
Not at all. I was way too young. And, you know, I didn't realize all this stuff until I was older. So that's when, you know, my mum told me that, you know, her biggest regret in life was sending me away, because I was the firstborn as well.
Sure.
You know, my sister, when she came around in 96, she had it easy, man.
She just stayed here. What's the matter?
She's no idea.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So she's had it easy. I've paved the way, I'd like to think, but yeah, I think it was a really difficult decision, especially for mum. It hit her quite hard. You know, she said it hit her hard, but it was also the biggest driving force for her and my father to scrape together everything that they could save,
so as you could be together as a family
to
again.
get a family home. And I think that's their pride and joy. That's probably why they've never moved. We've redone the house like twice.
It means so much to them.
It means everything to them. So, you know, because I even said to them, look, we can move out, we can find another place, and they're like, this is all they've ever known in their life, and they're happy. So I said, look, if you're happy, you're happy. Then.
But I think there's a difference between a house and a home. I think a house is somewhere you live in. Home is where
there's a song.
But isn't it? That's where all the experiences and the history and because of what they've gone through,
shared experiences.
It is such an important place.
When you came back, so you're about 4.5. Did you say 4.5? So did you then go to primary school? Would it be?
Yeah, primary school. I was just like.
And were you speaking English or?
No,
I was going to say, because that must be quite an interesting one.
It was very broken English.
Right.
I mean, I still struggle to speak English now, to be fair.
Oh, you're an outstanding communicator. Don't give us that.
What did he just say?
That says it all, right? No,
Boom.
Indian kid with this like really broken Indian accent, and I didn't think anything of it. I'm 4.5, 5 years old. I don't remember much, but you know, I had friends. You know, I enjoyed football and cricket when I was younger. I played around, and you know, childhood was nice, man. It was really good. Happiest years of my life, I guess.
So we roll forward a bit, and I'm intrigued because you're in quite a large group of dentists who got their first exposure to the profession through work experience. So what was it about when you did your work experience that turned your head towards dentistry and you thought, this is a bit of me?
So I think, like most Indian parents, as soon as you get your national insurance number, you turn 16, the first thing they expect you to do is get a job. And I was just, and then, we had the conversation of like, what do you want to do? I was very fortunate. My parents were very sort of progressive at the time. They said, look, whatever you decide to do, there are only two things we need. One, we want to make sure that you have some sort of university education in whatever it is you want to pursue. So get a degree. And then the second is to make sure it's something you enjoy. Don't go into something if you don't enjoy it. Try it out. If you're not sure, take your time. So I was very fortunate to have that sort of mindset from my dad and from my grandfather when I was younger as well. Because my dad was very honest. He says, look, dad wanted to become a doctor. He did he did like biochem and biomed when he was in India, and then he hated it. He didn't enjoy it much. He switched to becoming an engineer, liked it for a while, had some health issues, and then, he decided it wasn't for him. But he worked jobs to be able to provide for his family. He didn't enjoy them. He hated doing what he did, but he loved the people around him. And that's what kept him in these sort of, your standard working jobs when he was younger. So he didn't want that for me or my sister. He says, whatever you do, find something you enjoy. So I was very curious as a kid. I was like, okay, well, what do I enjoy? Okay, I enjoy playing video games. I enjoy watching like racing, and I enjoy like fast cars. So I was like, okay, maybe I'll be a games designer, or, you go through all these like little things, right? And then when it comes to the crux of it all, I think deep down with what I wanted is I wanted to be in a position where I could help people. And I narrowed it down to either going into medicine, going into dentistry, or going into optometry.
Right.
Because those were, friends of my parents that I was sort of like surrounded by. So it was kind of like the environment I was in. So I was like, okay, well, I don't know anything about these roles, right? I didn't look too deep into it. So I was like, let me shadow these people around. So I did work experience in Mayday Hospital. You've got to be perseverant, right? You've got to email, you've got to send, you've got to go physically in, you've got to find someone that you can speak to in person and just track them down and be like, look, can I just follow you around? I mean, I guess it was very different back in the day, right? As we're talking like, was this before like 2010, early 2000s, I guess?
We're old blokes, so when we hear stuff like that,
so it makes me laugh because I was like, it was a long time ago, and I'm thinking, like, I've got a pen older than that.
Because you're so young.
I think when you went back to India, I think that was the year I got married. So that puts it into context.
Wow.
Yeah. So don't do the back in the day thing.
Fine.
Back in 2010.
But yeah, I hated work experience in the hospital, and I just didn't enjoy it. And then I did it in an optometrist. I found it incredibly boring. I found it really repetitive and boring. I did work experience. My mum, because my mum worked in Sainsbury's, dad worked in Tesco. So mum would have all her regular like shoppers coming in, and one of them was a dentist, and she was talking about it. And then he was like, why don't you come to practice for a week or so just so you can see what it's like? So it was a small 2-surgery clinic in Carlsholton. So I take the bus there. And it was pretty cool. I had direct access to, it was literally just the hygienist and the principal dentist at the time, who was like a family friend of mum and dad. So did it for a week or so. It was pretty cool. I think like a couple of days in, what really struck me was the patients. There was one particular patient, and this was that sort of profound moment for me. It was a patient who was a victim of domestic violence, and she'd come in. And she was a new patient, and they did the consult, and she just broke down telling her story, and she's just in tears, right? There's this, this chubby looking 16-year-old kid in the corner watching this grown woman tell her life story, just break down in tears. And then just watching this dentist listen, and then, the nurse went to get a tissue. I went to grab her a cup of, like a glass of water and stuff. And then we took her outside because she was just in a state. So, the dentist was like, it's fine, I'm going to see the next patient. There's one more after her, and then just wait in the waiting room. And when you feel a bit more composed, come back in. So we took time out, and then, we spoke to her outside. And, I think this is where like humanity just sort of kicks in. So you see this woman who's just crying telling her life story of what she's been through.
Like they're real people, real situations.
I mean, I can't relate to anything that this woman's gone through. I'm a 16-year-old kid. I have no experience of life at that stage. But all I could see is there's someone who's hurting, and there's someone who's in pain, and someone who is just a shell of a person. And I was just like, I don't know what I can do to help, but like, here's a tissue and here's a glass of water. You know, just
sometimes that's the start. Sometimes that's enough in that moment.
I think that, and it was just instinctive. That's, you know, I didn't think, oh shit, what do I do? She's crying, like pat her on the back or something. No, you just instinctively do these things when someone's crying, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, after the dentist finished, we brought her back in. She sort of explained what was going on. She had a couple of broken teeth. She had jaw surgery before, and she had some cracked teeth and stuff. And
was this all as a result of the domestic
abuse?
abuse?
All as a result of what she'd been through.
Jeez.
And like she just kept apologizing. We were like, look, the dentist was like, you've got nothing to apologize for. You've been through a lot. Let's see what we can do to help you get back to health. And that was it. And I was so encapsulated by that moment. You know, I asked him, like, would you be okay if I can follow this case? Like, how many appointments is she going to need? And he was like, it's going to take a couple of months. There's quite a lot to do in, you know, the way we were booking things in. I said, is it okay if I can shadow? And then he says, if it's okay with the patient, then yeah. So he asked the patient was happy for me to be along, to tag along. So he sent me all the dates. And I just took the time off and I went.
Wow.
You know, there were days where I'd miss half of school, sixth form. I'd go off on my free periods and stuff. I mean, I told my sixth form tutors at the time, I was like, look, this is what I'm doing. I can make it up, I can catch up, whatever, but I'm going to this whether you give me permission or not. In my head, I was like, I want to see how this goes through, because I was genuinely encapsulated by it all. And then it was a period of a couple of months, and then afterwards, this woman was completely different. Like, she had her life together again. And I'm not saying that was just down to the dentist, but she could smile. She could just express who she was as a person.
Wow.
And I'm sure there were other things in the background that she was going through and managing. But to see that level of transformation in a person.
It was definitely part of those rebuilding blocks, wasn't it?
Exactly. And I thought, that's what I want to do for the rest of my life.
Wow.
And then I learned what the NHS dentistry system was. Once I got into FD, but that's a little bit further on. But the core of it was, I found something that I could use to. I found something that allows me to help people.
And what a very impactful experience for you.
Skill, isn't it? Really, the only one I can think about is like someone like a Max Fax or some plastic surgeons or something like that. But to replace someone's smile. Amazing. It is amazing.
Do you think, Sorabh, that there's still the opportunity at the early stage, like you had, for people to get work experience in dentistry? It's been talked about quite a lot recently, generally.
I think so. I think especially now with the rise of social media on dentistry, there's so many dentists out there on doing lots of educational content on Instagram, TikTok, social media, and they get tons and tons of followers. And if you're in sixth form, and if you're looking for work experience, you can reach out to some of these guys, and maybe they'll invite you along, or you can come along to their practice. You can meet them at lunch, or you can shadow them. I see no issues with that. I mean, we've hired one of our receptionists on a part-time basis. She wants to go into dentistry, so she's in sixth form. And I said, look, you can do some work experience, see what you think, and then. She's taking a gap year at the moment, and she's reapplying for dentistry next year. And we said, well, look, if you want to stay on a reception role, I can't do anything clinically, but we can help you. We can put you in an admin role, do all the checks and everything, and then we could hire you, we can pay you, and then you can see how things are. So I think there is scope for it. I think you have to be persistent. I understand the legalities and the insurance and all the indemnity and the GDPR and all that stuff, but if you get through that hurdle of admin and bureaucracy and paperwork, then there's no reason why. I mean, if you really want to get into dentistry and you seriously want to do this for the rest of your life, I think it is possible to find the work experience.
That's really encouraging to hear, because as a practice owner, I think we get quite a lot of students and younger people listen to this. So I think they'll be encouraged to hear that outlook's still there. So for you graduated in 2018. What was your dental school experience like, of the bit that you can remember?
just get through it, man. I gave up. It was, and I see this because I see.
Where did you?
I was going to say, where did you go?
Which school did you go to?
So I went to King's.
Right.
My first degree was in dental materials, which was at Queen Mary. And the reason for that is I didn't get into dentistry first time round at 18. So my first degree, dental materials for 3 years, Bachelor of Engineering in Material Science, focusing on dental materials at Queen Mary, which I hated at the time, but I'm incredibly thankful for what that did for me in terms of networking, the friends I have, the people I met, and the fact that it's nice when reps can't bullshit you anymore. Because
you know what they know.
I know what they know, or to a slightly more,
even more, I'd imagine,
more in-depth degree, right? So it's quite nice to know the in-depth and all this stuff about biomimetics and stuff. I was learning this back in 2013, 2014 when we were at Queen Mary doing dental materials, and now it's a buzzword. It's all come around, and I was like, all this stuff that they're teaching
10 years old
and all these courses, like I did this in my first degree, like from 2010 to 2013. Like
you even knew there was a dental materials degree?
Yeah.
I mean,
no, well, that's the beauty of clearing through UCAS. When you don't get your grades, you find all these amazing.
You find these random degrees.
But what I love is that was still a segue towards dentistry.
It was a choice.
You did the work experience. You didn't get in first time. Dental materials is kind of it's still pointing you in the right direction.
You didn't do a degree on Elvis.
No, you didn't want to give up. It was a heartbreaking moment when I didn't get the grades, and like I was really broken down about it. But then, I said to my dad, just said, "Do you want to do this?" And I was like, "Yes, I do." And he was like, "Then don't give up." That was literally it. It was just those two sentences. I was like, "All right, cool." That was literally it. That's how Asian parents back then showed support. But knowing that my dad was happy to support me through it, he was like, "Look, if this is what you want to do, don't compromise. It might take you another couple of years, might take you a little bit longer, but if you get there in the end, you get there in the end."
Yeah.
I was like, okay, well, let's do it.
Which has proven to be great advice. So you qualify, and then you didn't hang around, did you? Because by May 2021, you were a practice owner, coming into the sort of dental beauty partnership arrangement. I'm interested. So you weren't an associate for that long before getting into practice ownership, but also you chose to go down the partnership route as opposed to being a sole principal, just buying a practice on your own. What was the
motivation for both,
that?
really, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So it's it was a pretty interesting one. I think I knew I wanted to go into owning a practice. That was one of the things I wanted to do when I was sort of in foundation year, FT year, in my first year. I was like, I want to own my own practice one day. I don't know when, I don't know how, but when it happens, it will happen. I anticipate like 5-10 years out from graduating, I'd buy my own practice. What happened was I started looking for private jobs, sort of with 2 years of experience. So 1 year FT, 1 year as an associate with my portfolio of work. And I would apply to all these roles that had minimum 5 years, 8 years, 10 years experience. And I thought, well, I'm just going to disregard my date of birth on there. I'm just going to send them my work with my CV and my portfolio and all my photos and see what happens. And I got interviews. Interviews were great. Once I got to the interview stage and they said, when did you qualify? And I said 2018. So I didn't lie. I told them straight up and they're like, this role is for 8 years of experience. I was like, yes, but based on my work, you've given me this interview because from my work, it looks like I've got, 4 or 5 years of experience. And that's not because I'm being an arsehole or being cocky about it. It's just the way I learned during my FD year and the way I learned from sort of 3rd, 4th and 5th year of university was real dentistry happens in the real world. It doesn't happen at dental school.
Yeah.
So at dental school, I would often go and shadow dentists out in the real world. So one of the guys I shadowed was Payman Sabani. I saw this case that he posted. It was incredible. I messaged him. I said, I'd love to understand how you plan stuff like this. I think it was a veneer case. And back then everyone was like, oh, cosmetic dentistry, like you shouldn't be cutting teeth down, etc. But then I was like, look, you've clearly done this and you've done it incredibly well. Why did you do it? Why did you plan it the way you did? How did you manage the occlusion? How did you manage the long-term maintenance, all this other stuff? And he was like, look, I just probably sound like a really annoying kid to him. And he was like, look, why don't you come down to practice and shadow, see what you can and see a case? So I was like, yeah, I'd love that. So I went to shadow him. I think I was in my 3rd, coming into 4th year. So I went to shadow him. And then I shadowed a couple of other dentists out in the real world. And I learned that what we get taught in dental school is not what you actually do for the rest of your career. What you get taught in dental school is to follow instructions. You get told to jump and you say how high. That's what you're taught. And that didn't sit right with me. And I was like, all right, screw this. I'm going to pass my exams, get the degree, get the qualifications, do all the, jumping through hoops or whatever.
And then learn dentistry.
And then go and learn it.
Yeah.
So during my FD year, I learned from the mistakes that all these other guys did. Because I always ask these people who are 5-6 years more qualified than me, what mistakes did you do when you were younger and how did you avoid them? Or how would you avoid them now? Or with everything you know now, what would you do if you're in my position? And I just did those things. And I started in FD. I started doing courses as a foundation dentist. They're like, you shouldn't be doing courses. It's all in your FD year and your TPD will do it. I was like, my TPD is a dinosaur. He's a nice guy. But what he's trying to teach me is like 30, 40, 50 years behind. It's like nothing's
it's not
changed.
Up to date, yeah.
So I just went off and did it. I was like, screw it, let's just do it. And learning from the mistakes of other people and then also learning and reflecting on my own work got me these interviews. Didn't get any jobs. I had 2 offers. One was a salaried position. I was like, I'm definitely being taken advantage of here. I'm not going to take that on. And then the other one was like really unsociable hours. And I was like, all right, cool, I'm not going to do this. So I was speaking to my principal at the time at Dentology Croydon. His name's Sorabh Patel, the endodontist. Probably one of the biggest mentors I've had. And he was like, the grass isn't always greener on the other side. You think a private practice, you're going to make more money. You're not. It's much harder to fill your diaries. There's a lot more cost that goes on. You need to be able to convert and sell and do all these other things, which I was very naive to. He was like, people that make a decent income come from mixed practices. And I'm happy for you to go there. I'm happy for you to go to these private practices. I'm happy for you to, go off and search for a private job. I'll give you my blessing, but this is my thought. And I was like, it stuck with me. And then after a while, he was like, why don't you consider partnering? I was like, well, what do I need to partner? He told me what the requirements were. I didn't think it was possible. And he said, look, the main thing is you need to have really good clinical understanding of how to do good treatment plans. Like understanding full mouth treatment plans, understanding the nuances of it all. You don't have to be experienced enough to do the work because you can hire specialists and you can delegate out to people more advanced and more senior than you. But you need to understand how to plan full mouth treatment with respect to long-term maintenance, occlusion, and all these other things in the background. And if you can do that confidently and you can do it and you're not going to mess things up, then that could be something that we could consider and then I could put you forward. So for a good couple of months, he tested me. He referred patients to me that he's already seen for a consult, and he would go through with me, what's your treatment plan? And they weren't easy cases.
That's great.
A tooth wear case.
That's great, that mentoring, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's brilliant.
Obliterated their teeth. And he would say, what's your plan? And sometimes he would just he'd call me into his surgery, just show me an OPG and some pictures. He'd be like, plan this case. I was like, what do they want? He was like, just full mouth treatment, just optimal health and aesthetics. Health first, function second, and aesthetics very last. So as long as I got the health and function right, and then eventually he was like, yeah, it seems like you know what you're doing, but there's still a couple of other things you haven't learned. I'd recommend go do this, this, and this. So he'd tell me what things I'd need to look into doing in terms of increasing my knowledge skill, and then he'd send me off and do that. And then eventually an opportunity came to partner. And there was an opportunity for these practices, and it took me about 6 months to decide if I wanted to do it or not. So I sat on this decision for 6 months, and I was like, I thought, screw it, man. Like, I'm 2 years out. Why not? I'm jumping into the deep end with 2 practices, which one of them I'm going to refurb. I'm going to be managing 5 in each, so 10 surgeries in total. I've got 32 people under me. As support staff, dentists, hygienists, nurses, reception team, etc. And I was just like, shit, and then it's sink or swim, right? If you jump into it, you sink or swim. But the reason I wanted to go into partnership was I don't know what I don't know. And I'm very much aware of what I don't know. And I know that, okay, I can be a good clinician and I can understand how to manage and plan clinical side of things. I have no idea how to run a business. I have no idea what I I wasn't really financially literate. I didn't know how to read a P&L. I didn't know how to, set budgets. I didn't know what half
and
these financial
that's not unusual,
That's
either,
most dentists,
because
isn't it?
you go into learning a technical, science-based
right.
skill. So
they
you don't
teach
really
you.
need to understand P&Ls and the.
And then I
It's a
thought,
bit of a
well, look,
dirty word.
if there's an opportunity where these guys, Dental Beauty and, Dev and the team and the head office team can hold my hand through the business side of things, and then all I have to do is focus on the clinical side of things, but still having support with the other partners. So if there was a really difficult case and I was like, I don't know what to do here, I've got specialists that I can rely on to help me plan things. So, well, I was like, look, I've got a really good support system here. Worst case, if it all goes tits up, like, I learn from experience. I don't lose anything. I'm still really early on into my career and I can learn from it. Thankfully, it's been a very, very good process, and the practices have been quite successful. They've been really good. We've 4x'd the EBITDA in 3.5 years.
Brilliant.
A combination of the way I want people to do dentistry, the vision that I have, the way we sort of empower and motivate our patients, and also the support and the system that I've had from Dental Beauty, which has been fantastic. Now, I just thought this was normal. Then I learned from Sorabh Patel, who's been another big influence in my sort of career and my development. And I learned that when people go off and buy their first practice, it takes like 5 to 7 years for them to get a level of growth that, other people can get in a couple of years. He was telling me about his level of growth and what he's done with his first practice. And now he's bought several practices. He's done amazingly well. And, the question I asked Samir was a question I asked everyone when I was in my third year. With everything you know now, what would you do in my position? So, he says, look, the level of growth that I managed to achieve when I was your age in 7 years with this practice, I know the systems and the things I need to do to achieve that in 3 or 4 years. Because I know what mistakes led to, not being successful. I know what works. I know what doesn't work. And I've gone through it with trial and error. And yes, there are things that are outside of your control. COVID, cost of living, the budget, which is coming out today. But all of these things are cyclical in nature.
Yeah.
Like, all of this stuff happens. He went through, you got people that survived the financial crisis of 2008.
Oh, yeah. And those external factors, you're right.
The
You
changes
can do about that.
We just need to find a way of coping with
ride the
those.
wave and see it through, right?
Yeah.
So all of these factors, I thought, what's the worst that can happen? I've got support around me. I've got people that I can rely on. And the other thing was there were much smarter people than me partnering with Dental Beauty as well. And I was like, right, let's do it. And now I'm like, I'm at these board meetings with the partners and I'm like, I'm on the same table as people that I used to shadow when I was in third year. And that is a very surreal moment. And imposter syndrome still exists for me on a daily basis. I'm sitting on a table with people like Nick Zethi, Payman Sabani, Adam Salan, and I'm looking at all the incredible work they've done, all the teaching they do. And I'm like, I'm on the same table as these guys.
It's cool.
And like, my opinion matters to the same as these guys. And I was like, oh, great. This is.
What does your day-to-day look like? What does and that might be hard.
What's a typical day?
Yeah, you might have to give us the edited down version of it.
It's very ad hoc.
How many clinical days do you do a week?
How many what?
Clinical days do you do a week?
So I do about 4 clinical days.
Okay.
Because that's what I love the most.
Still a lot, yeah.
That's what I enjoy.
Yeah.
But in between my clinic, like during my clinical days, there's a lot of firefighting, right? Something random will happen and you've got to deal with it because you are...
The buck stops with you. Yeah. Yep.
That's it, right? So, I'll be going about my day. I like 4 or 5 exams in the morning, maybe an Invisalign, maybe a filling, maybe a crown prep. And then out of nowhere, I get a message saying, oh, one of the practices, the compressor's gone down. Or, hey, this needs to be serviced. The autoclave keeps pinging this weird error code. What do I do? And I'm like, I don't know what to do. So I'm like, okay, well, send me a picture of the error code. Let me send it off to head office and be like,
ask someone else. Yeah.
You've just got to delegate all this stuff and find the right people, right? But then there are times where you've got to step in, right? So there are times where, I've got to be there at like 6:30 in the morning because I've got UK Power Network coming into the surgery to change the fuse boards because the power consumption isn't going to be right for the new compressor and it keeps shorting out. these are the things you've got to do, which no one talks to you about.
Yeah.
It might be 12 o'clock at night and you're just getting ready to go to bed and you're going on holiday the next day. You get a text message saying one of your staff is going through something and
won't be in.
Bereavement. There's been an emergency. There's been an alarm.
So your alarm goes off.
You've got to be able to adapt to these things. And you can't do this on your own. This is why I think having a partnership is really key, or having an incredible practice manager is quintessential in helping to run the place. So my day-to-day is the things I enjoy. And at any given moment, there might be some random surprise that will happen. Might be a good one, might be a bad one. We just don't know. Right?
Every day has a surprise. It's just negative or positive.
You learn to adapt and you learn to take emotion out of it. Like I get very, when something happens, like there's a half an hour period where I'm just like swearing, and just really angry or pissed off that this has happened. It's ruined my day. It literally happens for about 20, 15 minutes. I'm human at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. But I've got enough self-awareness to know that, look, it's not in my control. What's happened has happened. Let's fix it. Or let me figure out how to fix it. And then we figure out how long it's going to take me to fix it. And then I can communicate that to my team. And then the other thing I've realized is something that is completely irrelevant and non-essential to me might mean the world to my team.
Really important to somebody else.
The best example is when they asked me, can we get coat hooks? And I was like, this is the most nonsense request I've ever heard. Like, what do you mean coat hooks? This is like 6 months into owning the practice. They're like, yeah, we really want coat hooks. I was like, why? I was like, when the patient comes in, they just dump their coats on our chairs. And it's really awkward because then I don't know where to put it. And then their coats and their bags are on the nurse's chair. I was like, okay, let me order some coat hooks off Amazon and I'll put them up. It took 2 days. They came the next day. I fitted them all in and they were over the moon.
Yeah.
So, and then I later learned from Samir's course, these are what they call critical non-essentials. So they're non-essential to the running of the business and to the profitability of the business, but they're absolutely critical for practice culture. And if you get the practice culture right, everything else stems into it.
Also, I think it's being listened to as well, isn't it? The fact that
that's it, yeah.
It manifested itself in some coat hooks, but it was a request made that you listened to, you took on board, and you acted
it's
on
even
it.
Things like coffee, isn't it? I remember we had a time at we bought some coffee because it was cheap from Macro or something. You can buy it as bulk, and we were like, yeah, right result. And then the team just didn't like it, so they said, well, we don't really like the coffee, so we then changed the coffee. But it's those sort of really silly, inconsequential, not very expensive things, but they then, if you don't do anything about them, the problem is they're a bit like a festering spot.
Exactly.
They just get worse.
Up at some point.
And people watch you. They watch you. Going back to the thing you're saying about culture and leadership, they watch how you react to these requests, how you behave, whether you are listening. So the coat hooks was a massive tick in the box. Okay, it was some coat hooks, but that wasn't what it was about. It was about Sorab's the sort of guy that does listen to us and he does take action and he does make things happen.
I don't always get it right. Don't get me wrong. If you ask my team, they'll probably say, Sorab didn't do this, he didn't do this, he didn't do this. Or he didn't do this quick enough. But
I think the beauty, Sorab, is as you get more, I mean, we've run a business now 20 odd years or so, and the things we did before, the lovely thing is that as you get older, there's still things that will happen that have never happened before, and we're like, oh, okay, well, that's you. But most of the things that happen are things that once you've had them happen once, you're like, oh, it's a variation on a theme, so I know what I did with that one. Absolutely. And I think that's the great thing of the more you get on.
So go on.
That was another reason why it just made sense for me to partner with Dentology, because I went through problems in my practice and I was like, I don't know how to manage this person's current problem, or I don't know how to manage this thing that's happening. And then, the other partner's like, oh, I had this a couple of months ago. This is what I did. I was like, oh, cool. I was like, I'll just do what you did.
In your support system.
You're learning from a collective experience, right? So
you've moved quickly. By average standards, from qualification through to partnership. Has there been a cost to this success? Has something been left behind or missed? We talk a lot about success. Yeah. This isn't kind of a failure thing. It's that we can only ever do so much. And has there been a cost for this success?
I think that's a really important question that no one ever considers, because what you see in socials is the highlight reel.
Everything's great.
Post up all your failures and stuff.
Yeah.
I don't have regrets, because people often ask, like, there are good days and bad days, and then there's completely earth-shattering crap days where you just want to do nothing and just get swallowed up whole by the earth, right? There are days where you're on cloud 9, and then there are days you're in the pits of hell. And you think you're at rock bottom, and then you realize there's a whole other level underneath you. But not once since qualifying have I ever regretted any decision I've made. And that's one thing that I'm very proud to say with the people I have around me and the team I have. The cost to this, I think there is a personal cost that you need to consider. But I'm very headstrong in what I want to achieve in the next, I know what I want my life to look like. And I'm happy to pay these prices early on in my career so I don't have to later on. So the cost, you asked, what is the cost? The cost is I wasn't around a lot in my first 2 to 3 years after graduating when it came to family events. I wouldn't go to them because I'd be on a course, or I'd be shadowing someone, or I'd be at work, or I'd be learning something, or I'd be doing something. There were birthdays, there were events, there were weddings, there were things that were important to my parents that I couldn't make. Or if I did come, it'd be for a couple of hours and then I'd have to go off again.
Yeah.
So a lot of family time suffered. A lot of the relationship I had with my parents suffered. And I could never repay them for all the things they've done for me. I helped out where I could. The mortgage is now paid off, which is great. That was the first thing I promised myself I'd do. Once I started earning a decent amount, everything would go into sort of helping paying back my parents and whatever. So that's one thing I was very happy that I managed to do. But the cost is, it's high, because you'll get into these arguments with your parents. You'll get into these arguments with the people you love, your friends, your family. And it's at the cost of, well, I know what my dream is. I know what I want to build. I know what I want to do. And at the end of the day, I alone am responsible for my happiness. And the one thing that drives me quite heavily is, the cost of regret. I don't want to do anything that I'm going to regret. So if there is an opportunity for me to learn a particular protocol or go on a particular course, and I'm like, you know what, I think that'll be really useful for me. And then I'm like, oh crap, that means I can't go to this person's wedding or this person's thing or this, and this. I'm like, okay, what am I going to regret more? Not going to the wedding, not going to this, not going to that. And then things change over time. Don't get me wrong. The first 2-3 years, everything I made went into courses, went into self-development, went into paying my parents. I didn't really save much, didn't have a property to my name or anything like that. I was literally living paycheck to paycheck. And I wasn't very financially literate either. So there was a huge, huge personal cost to the relationships I had around me at the time. Do I regret it? No. Because at the end of the day, where I am in life now, this is the most success, and this is the most success I've ever experienced in my life. And I don't mean money.
Yeah, success is lots of definitions, isn't it?
And I used to think success was winning all these awards, being recognized for all this, and doing all these things. And I recently did this talk and to these young dentists, like Future of Dentistry, your Future of Dentistry Summit, or this thing that Joe Lovett had organized. And I was there, and there was this slide with all the things I had achieved in the 5 years I had been qualified. And I looked at it, and I looked at these people that I'm talking to, and I was like, this stuff is great, but none of this is success for me, man. Yeah. The most successful thing was, having a drink with my dad on my wedding reception. Being able to dance with my mom at my wedding reception, being able to go on all these incredible adventures and trips with my wife, being able to have the time to spend with the people I love. And I didn't have that in the first 2 to 3 years of my after qualifying. And I did pay a price for that. It took me a while to rebuild that. And they didn't always understand. And I got into so many arguments with my mom. And even now we still argue about some of this stuff. But I said to my mom, look, I don't regret any of my decisions, and I'm really sorry that I've put you in these positions. But those 2 to 3 years of sacrifice where I've had to cut back on all these other things, because she kept having a go at me saying, why are you not saving for a house? Why have you not got any savings? Why have you not got this? Why are you not doing this? Why aren't you coming to this event, or this event? Now I can turn around and I say to my mum, look, I'm really sorry that all those things happened. But I'm now in a position in my life where I've got all the things I've ever wanted in my career in the space of 3 years instead of 10. And now, if anything needs doing, I'm all in.
You're present.
You know, the boiler went last month. She messages me. I was like, what do you need? She was like, we need a new boiler, this, and this. I was like, taken care of. You know, they wanted to put blinds up in the house. I was like, cool, just send me the invoice. And that is the most powerful thing that I've been able to do. And that is success to me.
Interesting.
Right? That was success to me. And then, you know, going on holiday, I know it sounds really stupid, but being able to go on the types of holidays with my friends, doing the things we love. Like we did a trip where we literally drove across the Himalayas in a rickshaw. And I never thought I'd be able to do that in my life. You know, I went swimming with turtles and sharks and stuff. And I was like, I never thought I'd be able to do this in my life.
Yeah.
And the reason I can do all those things now is because I put the hard graft in when I was younger. You know, there were times where I would leave the house before my parents did. By the time I got home, my parents would be asleep. There was a 2-week period during my final year where I didn't see my parents for 2 weeks. And I lived at home because I'd be out before they were up and I'd be back home by the time they were asleep. And it wasn't because I was out drinking or partying. I wish I was, but it's getting in early, doing the work, going to revise, doing shadowing, doing whatever it is I needed to do, traveling back and forth, meeting all the people I needed to meet. And now it's paying off. And now I'm reaping the dividends of the sacrifices I made.
And it's great for people to hear that story as well, because like you say, it's very easy just to scroll down Instagram and it all looks so glossy and prissy. But I believe there is always a cost. There's always a cost, and people don't often talk about that. And it would be lovely if the next time you present, you have 2 slides. You have a slide that shows your awards and the accolades and what you've achieved professionally, and then there's the other side, which is the truth. And for lots of young people, it's a choice. Yeah, they can follow your path.
Consequences.
And they will have amazing things happen, but equally there's another side to it, is that sometimes things do get kind of left behind or missed. And
no, absolutely.
it is a choice, and there's a life beyond the day we're living today. It's kind of, where do you want to be in the future,
and I think
against what you're doing today.
The one thing, just to really touch upon this, Andy and Chris, I think in my final year and in my FD year, those were the hardest years. That's when there was a lot of sort of depression. There was a lot of burnout. And, you know, I said in the opening of this speech that I gave in front of these 300 students, you know, I wasn't meant to be here because, you know, I tried to take my own life back in May 2018 because of everything that was going on.
Wow.
And that was a cost. That was the highest cost. Thankfully, I didn't. And I realized that I'm burning out. I'm depressed with what I'm doing. This isn't healthy. And that was a real turning point. And that was something that I've been very vocal about since after COVID. Because I think a lot of people went through a lot of hardships over COVID. A lot of people lost a lot of things. They paid a very heavy price. And then, you know, and I'm very thankful to Joe Lovett, who helped me find my voice in telling my story. And, you know, since then I've helped a lot of people sort of realize that, shit, someone as successful as what Sorabh appears to be or has gone through this. And, you know, I still get imposter syndrome. I still burn out. I still have anxiety about certain things, but I'm more self-aware on how to manage and control it.
Did you do counselling for when you were at that stage? I say, because I think it's so important that people realise that. Don't try and just deal with it on your own.
It took a while for me to process it. So that was the hardest part, Andy. It wasn't like, you know, I was like, okay, cool. Well, you know, this is what I went through. And the next day I was like, oh, I'm going to call up a counsellor. It wasn't like that. I wish I was that self-aware. I had to process what I was planning on doing. And that took me a good while. And I realized this is not who I am. This is not my identity of who I identify myself as. This isn't the values that I've been brought up with. Why did I go down this dark path? Why did I go down that route of suicidal thoughts?
Yeah.
Why did I plan to take my own life? Why were those thoughts in my head? And that took some time to process. And I couldn't speak to anyone about it. Couldn't speak to my friends, couldn't speak to my family, couldn't speak to anyone that I knew or loved for the social stigma, the mental, the fear. So I thought, I need to find someone who's completely disassociated from my life, someone who I don't know at all. And it took me a while to find the right sort of therapist and counsel. And when I did, it was probably one of the best things I did. Just unloading and finding out what led to that event.
That point,
And now having the tools to prevent that from ever happening. And then being able to share that story to prevent that from ever happening to anyone else.
Which I think is really,
and I think that's
really
part of
powerful.
it, isn't it? Sharing it, that people then are, it's not just me or someone else who, as you say, appears to have it all, but inverted commas, whatever, has those same thoughts.
And I think
well.
it's that thing, isn't it? It's sharing the multidimensional aspects of life. It's not just sharing, I qualified, I bought a practice, I've got a big team, we're making good money, everything's great, on to the next one. It's we all have different elements to our lives, and I think it's really brave and honest of you to share it in this way, because there'll be a lot of other people that will be scratching their heads going, I don't feel great at the moment, and perhaps I need to have a chat to somebody now before I end up a bit further down that path.
And I've had countless messages from students, and that's the scary part, Chris and Andy. It's students.
But that was you. But that was you, wasn't it?
Yeah, and
that was you at the end of your degree. You were in that situation.
Yeah, and they're still going through the same stuff that I was going through.
And a lot of it's self-imposed, isn't it? Self-imposed pressure from what they are perceiving they should maybe be like, and they're failing. It's just like mad.
And it is even the stage that you're at, and it's interesting listening to you talk about why you went into partnership. Dentistry is a surprisingly lonely profession. Lots of people spend hours locked away in a room with their nurse, and there will be professional communication, but sometimes not much beyond the professional communication. And patients are spinning in and out of the chair every 20 minutes. It's not a particularly healthy environment. They don't see the profession outside of their surgery.
Isn't it the second highest suicide rate?
I think it always used to be farmers were first, and then it was dentistry. And it's in many ways, it's a shame you went through the experience you did, but it's also great that you're talking about it, because it does mean that other people, it gives them license to reach out to you, or perhaps have some help for themselves, or talk to other people, because that's kind of where it all sort of gets stopped in terms of people end up further down that path.
I remember someone telling me once about that. Those little toys you get as it's like in a tube, it's like a glass, and it's got that funny snake in it. And when you take the lid off, it goes and they were saying quite often what you need people to do is just learn to take the lid off, and it will come out. But that's sometimes what you'll need as a counsellor is they'll take the lid off so as you can let go of those things. Otherwise it just slowly builds up. It's mad.
Just to twist things before we finish up, Sorabh, can you remember the first patient you ever treated?
No.
Is that because it was so painful for you, not the patient?
I think it's because like the intensity of like your first patient. It was probably just a simple checkup. But you're so panicked about, okay, I've got to check their ID, I've got to check their medical history, I've got to ask them this, I've got to check that, I've got to go through Socrates, I've got to go through this, and then I've got to write this down in my notes, and then you're just like, by the time you finished it all, you're like,
you're exhausted.
You forgot who they were or what they were. Well, the ones I do remember, and this is really weird.
That's a shame, because we had Mrs. Johnson who was about to come in. It's all right, Mrs. Johnson, he doesn't remember you.
The weird thing is, I always remember my first Invisalign patient.
Right.
For all the practices I've worked in, the first one in each practice, I always remember.
That's interesting.
I don't know why. I think it's because you spend you see them every 4 to 6 weeks for reviews and checking, and you kind of build that rapport, which I really enjoy. I think I really love
That's true, I
Getting
suppose.
the personal
Isn't it?
side of it, getting to know them, finding out, the human side of it.
Mm.
You know? That's what I love the most.
It's more than I've seen your brother.
Yeah.
But that goes right back to the very top of the episode, doesn't it? When you're talking about you were that 16-year-old kid sitting in the corner of the surgery, you've got a broken patient, she's really upset, and it's that human connection, that person, and it's a very different situation. But your view on building relationships and impacting lives hasn't really changed much. Okay, in that case, it was providing aligners, and it's going to improve their smile. At the very beginning, it was seeing somebody who just needed a tissue or a glass of water. But it's lovely to hear that was spotted so early by you, and it still carries on.
It continues.
Yeah, and I think this is what I try and sort of help a lot of young dentists with is communication. Because you can be the best dentist in the world, you can have all the great technical skills, but it's not going to help you if you can't connect with the person in front of you.
If you can't speak properly.
And then the other thing is, you can spend thousands on courses to learn these technical skills. You go back in Monday morning, but if you can't explain the value of what you do or what you provide, or connect and build genuine connection and rapport and be authentic, that's the key here, to be your authentic self.
Yeah.
What's the point? You're just throwing that money away.
Yeah.
And then, I think communication is the most important thing in life, especially in our profession. Being able to connect and build trust with people, whether it's your team, whether it's your nurse, whether it's your patient, is quintessential to having a successful career, but more importantly, a stress-free career. If you've inspired trust around your team and the people around you, you can't fail. Because if something goes wrong, it's not just you on your own. You've got everyone there helping you. And it goes for someone else. If something goes wrong with my nurse or my associate or my receptionist, I don't isolate them. I've got the entire practice rallying around them to help them get through whatever issue or problem they're facing.
That's a great culture.
And I think that's a really fantastic thing to build, but you can't do that unless you have the right communication.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Sorry, we could talk all day, honestly, but we need to we need to wrap up, because it's been a wonderful conversation. But as ever, you don't get out of the studio until we ask you two questions. Okay. So our first question for you is: if you could be a fly on the wall in a situation, where would you be and who'd be there?
That's gosh, you know how to ask like really difficult questions, don't you?
It's the fun part of what we do.
I don't know. I think the one thing that comes to my mind for me, does it have to be dental?
No, it can be anything.
Whatever you want.
That. Okay, fine. Dentistry is great. It's just teeth at the end of the day.
It could be Nelson Mandela if you wanted it to be. Or
no, you know what? It's really weird. So I'm a massive F1 fan. I'd love to have been a fly on the wall when they made that decision for Max and Lewis at the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix.
In Abu Dhabi, Michael Massey. For people that don't realise that there was a safety car situation, and
I'm just like, what was going on in that room? What conspiracy theories were flying around? What was happening?
Who was being paid more money?
Why did he make that decision? Because that has completely echoed through the next couple of seasons.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, that's. I think that would be my answer. I just want to know.
I don't think it was any more complicated than Michael Massey just wanted an absolute
I think he just
dream ending to the season, and he didn't want that race to finish under a safety car, which is what would have happened.
Yeah.
And I think he wanted a dream ending, and he didn't accept or reflect on the fact that there are rules in place for what has to happen. He completely disregarded those and did his own thing. He was like a
just want to know what if other people in the room with him were like, "What the hell are you doing?" Like, listen, I'm making this decision on my own.
It's probably no different than some of the VAR decisions on football.
No,
absolutely,
no,
absolutely. But that was
good answer.
Good answer. It wasn't offside.
Yeah. And if you could meet somebody, Sorabh, who would you like the opportunity to sit down and have a coffee?
And it doesn't have to be dental again.
No, it doesn't have to be dental.
Anyone you like.
Yep.
Living or dead.
Fact or fiction.
Oh, this is tough. Okay, there's I can't narrow it down to one. There's two.
Okay, we'll let you have two then.
Have two?
Yeah, you can have two.
One's a person and one's like a group. Does that
Okay,
count?
yeah,
go on
I
then.
think the
that's
first
more
one,
than two, really, isn't it?
I think for me, I'd probably want to meet my grandfather again, who passed away when I was 11,
Right.
and just have a conversation on like just life. I think that'd be cool. That's probably the deeper answer. The more fun answer, I would say, I'd love to meet Jeremy Clarkson, James May, and Richard Hammond, and just have a pint with them, and just hear all their stories and plan the next crazy road adventure with my mates. That's probably what I'd want to do.
That'd be a good conversation.
Yeah, because we did that a couple of years ago. As I said, we drove across the Himalayas.
Yeah.
Now we're like planning the next one in like 2026, 2027.
Sounds like the Namibian desert to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, you've got to live life, man. You can't be surrounded by the same four walls Monday to Friday, 9 to 5.
Long time dead.
There's a whole world to see.
Yeah.
So live life. That's it.
Brilliant. So thank you for your time. It's been a joy.
Yeah,
Thank you so much for having me on, guys.
We've moved
Pleasure.
very quickly through an awful lot, and you're still relatively early on in your career, so you'll definitely be somebody that will
He's a
love
young
to have
man.
back on.
He's a young man, and we
love to have you back on at some point.
Yeah. That's too kind of you guys. Thank you.
Now, brilliant. Look after yourself.
Yeah,
Cheers,
Sorab.
Thank you very much, guys.
Ta-da.
Take care.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Dentology, where we discuss the business of dentistry. If you like what you heard, please do subscribe where you found this episode. That would be amazing. And also follow us on Instagram.